this person is coming in to thank you for helping them get to the other side, for letting them get to the other side. She's like, you gave them the breath of light.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Orphic. My name is Alyssa. I'm an astrophysicist. I have my PhD. My specialty is in supermassive black holes and galaxy evolution. That is what my PhD was on. That's what I'm kind of most interested in, the whole large-scale universe. But in terms of what I'm really interested in now is I want to understand how the universe works holistically in terms of its consciousness. The universe is alive. I think there's a consciousness to everything. So what I'm really trying to do on this podcast and with my life now since my PhD is try to figure out how the universe works and what are the energetics to it. And my Instagram is at interdimensional.astrophysics. So definitely go check me out over there.
Hey, and I'm Mikayla with Mariposa Moonchild on Instagram. I'm an empathic medium, intuitive energy healer, here to activate the healing codes on the planet.
Ooh.
I feel like I'm here to support and guide others along their healing journeys, as well as I'm super interested in, just like Alyssa said, well, she talked a little bit more about the consciousness of everything, but I'm definitely interested about the consciousness of everything too, on like an energetic level, a cellular level, and then also what that means for our bodies as we heal, like healing our DNA, the consciousness of our DNA, all of these big mysteries, all of these questions. So I'm here as a guide.
Yeah. That's good. I like that you mentioned the DNA stuff. So on this podcast, just a bit about what this podcast is about. We're telling the story of our own experiences and our own healing journeys, getting pretty vulnerable with some topics, but we're really just kind of trying to figure it out. We're trying to understand the way things work. So we go through a lot of cool topics that get into quantum physics and astrophysics. So sometimes I'll bring in some astrophysics topics and we'll try to unpack them and explain them in a way that's digestible, but go beyond that and, things like that. And definitely incorporating quantum physics into things like the body and healing, right? The body is so important to everything that we're doing right now. And I think sometimes it's overlooked in the spiritual community. And it's just really important for everything.
Yeah, you had a video the other day about how your body is a map to the universe, and I really want to explore more and learn about that. And then also just like with this podcast, this is also just a space for us to talk through and unpack our experiences as it's happening, as well as the downloads that come through, and to speak on the downloads for if they resonate with anyone else. I know a huge part of my healing journey and just my awakening journey is listening to other people that I resonate with, and like always take what we say with a grain of salt, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, but listening to other people and having like I can full-heartedly say I've had moments where there's like something that just like clicks in my brain or my spirit or my body, and I'm just like, oh wow. But somebody took a concept and they explained it in such a simple, digestible way, and something just like clicked in my brain. By just listening to somebody else's podcast or their YouTube or whatever it is on their experience or their downloads. And now Alyssa and I are in this space, sharing this space, and sharing our experiences, hoping to do the same.
Yeah.
If it can support and also guide people that are kind of awakening and coming into this community. And the other thing is like, we're still very, like, we've learned a lot, and we also have a lot to learn and to expand into and grow. So we're here to speak on what's that process of when you're in the midst of that, like I feel like there's a lot of people who maybe seem like they have it all figured out, or some that have done like lifetimes and lifetimes of healing, and they are these like teachers, and I love listening to them. But it's also so I think, interesting to like listen to like someone being in the process in like real time. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think that there's a lot to that sometimes when you, yeah, just listening to someone unpack something, there's a lot of times that can just ignite some kind of understanding in you. And I think we've already had that a lot with some of the things we've said on this podcast, even for me, just listening back, kind of just being like, oh yeah, so that's another one of our goals, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like, experiences are our greatest teachers. Not even that, experience is our teacher. Like it's just, that's it. Like experience is our teacher. And when you're learning about energetics, you begin to learn about kind of like that give and take and how that works. And then in real time, Alyssa and I are like unpacking kind of what's happening in our lives, and like, yeah, I guess what's the energetics of that? What's coming up in our experience? What's like, you just also had a clip that you made from one of our past episodes on quantum healing about how our inner world creates our outer world. And so it's just like, it's like with my experience right now, how am I feeling internally that's reflecting this like experience around me? And I'll even go into like a little bit of an example right now. Yesterday was an intense astrology day, I guess, for like relationships. There was something about like Aries, which is the self. And then it was something in Libra. I'm not an astrologist, guys. I just like listen to other people. And that was the Libra part was like in relationship or like together. And Bryce and I kind of like woke up having these like random like arguments, but then these arguments got like really deep and emotional. And some of it was like, I was like sitting down and doing some of my like sitting at my altar, doing my praying, blah, blah, blah. And he was trying on some of his golf clothes. And I like went into his room and was like, hey, so like, and and we had to talk this out because I can tell how he felt the way he did. And from his perspective, I went in there and was kind of like, hey, so like, are you ever going to be interested in anything that I do? Like, do you ever want to do any of this? And he's just like, what the fuck? I'm like, just trying on my golf clothes. And he took it very much as like, I was telling him that he should like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this right now. Like what you're doing is silly. Like you should be doing what I'm doing. Or you should care more about that. Yeah, in my head, that's not where I was coming from, but I could see how it could come out that way. And then we just like talked about it more. And it was interesting because I did like say some things where like, you know, it would be cool if we could do some things together. It'd be cool if like you'd like to like learn some things from me, or like, can I like teach you this? And like, and although I do desire that in a partnership, I don't know, you are two individual people. As well as after it all, I seen this really, I'm like, relationships are just mirrors. Your experience are just mirrors. So I'm just like, ooh, maybe this is just a huge reflection of, oh, Mikayla, do you feel like you're not doing enough? Are you judging yourself because you don't think that you're sitting down at your altar, or that you're meditating, or that you're doing all this stuff enough? If I am, or if I'm not, but am I having a moment where I'm judging myself for that? And then I'm projecting that judgment outwards, but like, hello, it's just like, look in the fucking mirror.
Yeah. So yeah, I could see it being a little bit of both. But yeah, it's definitely that kind of reflection. And yeah, thanks for sharing that, because it's like these triggers, especially those kinds of relationship triggers, especially when you're in a relationship that's not ending anytime soon, and you know it's not ending anytime soon. You're like, oh crap, now I really just gotta look inward. I'm so pissed.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like I'm projecting out on Bryce. I'm like, you like, do you want to like look inward more? Like, do you want to like do some healing? And it's just like, it's really hilarious because it's like, who am I really talking? Like, I'm talking to myself. Yeah. As we do, like that's like as we do when we put our projections onto other people, or our judgments, or our whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and we're kind of stepping through these things. We talk also on here just a lot about our own personal triggers and just observing them and things like that. So that's good. That was a good, relevant share.
Yeah, I feel like that's the part of being in the experience, and then you and I unpacking that together. And that's part of why we started this podcast too, because like, if you haven't been listening so far, Alyssa and I have never met in person. I live in Canada. She lives in New York. We have only talked over Zoom and whatever, but we've talked a lot. Like, we talk every single day and now that we have the podcast, I feel like less voice memos, but there was times where it was a lot of voice memos. Like, we were just talking back to each other, back and forth all day, every day, just constantly unpacking things that were in our experience. So now we have this container, this vessel, this conscious creation that we can speak into and unpack some of this stuff.
Perfect. Do you want to tune in?
Yeah, I'll do a ground in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we also like to start each podcast when we remember. We like to start each podcast with a few deep grounding breaths, just so that everyone, so that if you're listening to this, you can really get the most out of the experience and be present. And I always like to say, we all have to breathe anyway. So why don't we just do it consciously, and why don't we just do it together? So Mikayla will guide this, and we're just going to do a little ground in before the rest of this episode.
Yeah. So if you're able to, close your eyes, put your feet flat on the floor, and let's take a couple deep cleansing breaths. I'm just going to light my Palo Santo to just cleanse and clear. All right. So let's take a deep breath in, filling your lungs all the way to the top. Pause, open your mouth, and release. Another big breath like that. Fill your lungs all the way to the top. Pause, open your mouth, and release. Letting go of anything negative, anything that's been weighing you down, releasing it with a breath. Take another breath just like that. Breathing in beautiful white light into your body, into your heart space, and letting go of anything that's not serving you with the breath. One more big breath in. Fill your lungs all the way to the top. Pause, open your mouth, and release. And then when you're ready, gently bring yourself back into this space.
So this episode, we're playing the part 2 of the previous episode, which is me and Mikayla talking about our experiences getting this energy healing with this woman, Loesje Jacob, who runs Linking Awareness, and it was at this ranch called Eagle's Eye Ranch in Canada, and Mikayla was there, and yeah, so that's what this episode is going to be, part 2 from last week. So definitely check out the part 1 if you haven't yet. A lot of cool experiences. That one talks a bit about more about my session within this day of all these energy healing sessions facilitated by animals and horses and stuff. And yeah, anything else you want to add?
Nope. Go check out part 1 if you haven't yet, because this is part 1 and part 2 of our story at Eagle Eye Ranch, and it's pretty wild. So come in with an open mind and open heart.
Yes. All right. Enjoy. Thank you. And then the last thing, which would also be relevant for you, was that Loesje told both of us that it's time, that she felt it was time for us to meet Aya, which is ayahuasca, which is plant, sitting in some very sacred plant medicine ceremony. So ayahuasca. Grandmother Aya, yeah. Yeah, ayahuasca is a plant medicine. I've heard many things about it. You hear all these, it's very much like kind of a spiritual, like it's almost, I guess I spend a lot of time on like the jokey side of spiritual Instagram. I love when people like make fun of things and just laugh about things, and I just feel like, you know, it's easy to kind of get with some of it. I just feel like everyone's like, oh, you take ayahuasca and you get so enlightened from it, and sometimes people like outsource.
Well, it's true. Like if you want to get all very like dogmatic and like some of the new agey, like it is kind of been a trendy thing.
Yeah.
Where people are like, I went into the jungle and I did ayahuasca.
Yeah,
and
now
I'm a guru.
Yeah.
And like,
so that's like the most I know about it in terms of, you know, so I just know the idea of it. I know that it's supposed to be a very profound experience, obviously. But yeah, it came up for actually both me and Mikayla that we're meant to, or that it's time. That's what she said for both of us. It's time
to meet grandmother Aya. And I mean, there's a lot of things 'cause it's funny to joke about it, the way it's like been trendy and like the spiritual people or whatever will talk about it. But there's also like, I mean, we've talked about the new earth and the ascension and like the rising of the frequency. So like, is it really any coincidence that like, right, that people are going and like doing these like healing ceremonies as much as you want to like make fun of it or whatever. And it was interesting because I think we were the only people that it didn't come up last time when I was there. It was the only people I think that it came up for, and she was very just like, it's time. And I know for myself, I've always known that I'll sit in ceremony.
Yeah.
I'm very called to like plant medicine. But I also knew that it would be the right time. I didn't really need to seek it or anything, or I would know when it's the right time. And I'm definitely feeling that a little bit more. But I've actually sat in meditation, or I've had grandmother Aya come to me before in meditation, and I've like sat with the spirit of her before too. So I always knew that I probably would be one day, but I'm like a little bit afraid.
Oh, same.
So
I'm like very afraid. I'm, you know, I haven't even done a full mushroom trip. Like the most I know about kind of leaving your normal state of consciousness is cannabis. That's the most I know. That's the furthest I've gone to leave my mental state. I've not done a full mushroom trip or anything, and I'm scared to do that too. So ayahuasca, like, you know, we'll do it when the time, like, clearly it's just the beginning of us now inviting it into our field whenever the time is right. And maybe we'll even do it together. We kind of talked about.
I mean,
who knows?
There's probably a high chance of that. Like, I guess we'll see. I think it will all kind of slide into place as it's like meant to.
Yeah.
But it was really funny because the other day I was talking to Alyssa about, like, we were just voice memoing back and forth as I was driving, kind of talking about our sessions and stuff. And I mentioned, oh yeah. And she talked to us about Aya. And then in my head, I was kind of thinking, oh, where would I do that or how? Because you want to make sure that, like, because with the rise in popularity, that you're going to somewhere that, like,
trusted, good,
that they
source,
that they know what they're doing and it's high vibrational, and it's like, again, it's kind of like being careful about who you're opening yourself up to. And then as I did the voice memo, and then right after that on the podcast I was listening to, the lady like plugged where she went to her like ayahuasca ceremony, and she's like, this is not an ad. I just had a really good experience, so I just like want to share it, and so people know. And I was like, ooh, interesting.
Yeah, that's
but
really
that is
interesting.
in Costa Rica.
We should check that out, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go when the time is right, and
it'll find us. So basically that was my session experience. It was very interesting. I'm still kind of processing it, and my energy field in my body is still processing it. And she said a lot of these things, it takes a few weeks for it to kind of integrate into your system. So we're in the integration period. It's been less than a week now since this day. And on also, like, you know, we just unpacked all this cool stuff about like channeling, and there's so much more there's so many more nuggets for me, and that's what's cool about experiences like this. Sometimes it's like, just one little thing you can unpack.
Even
later.
with your reading, she specifically made a comment about outcomes in our podcast to come in the next weeks coming up. So we're looking forward to that, I guess, open to seeing whatever that could mean. But even me talking about the ripple effect at like in the beginning of our episode or earlier on, she was explaining that too, how she's like, you showing up today, you doing this session, it doesn't just affect you, it affects everything that's in your projection. So it affects your partner, it affects your mom, your dad, it does the generational healing all the way back. Like it clears these things. So it's not just you, like it's
right. Yeah, I forgot about that when she said that is really interesting, and it's very true. And it's like, you don't think about it that much, but the effects are affecting.
Yeah. And my mentor always says, you're healing, I think he says 40 generations back and 40 generations forward.
Oh, wow.
Which is a lot.
Wow. That's cool.
Like, 40 generations ago, like how many years ago would that even be? Like, that's a long time ago. It's a long time ago. I mean, yeah, time's not real though, so it's happening right now. All right. Anything else? Any other insights, things to add on for your session? It's pretty cool.
No,
cool
yeah,
to watch
I feel good. I feel like we unpacked some cool things about it on here. So what about your session?
Yeah, let's get into my session. I feel like there's a lot to cover with that too. All right. So my session comes, I'd already done the Sanunga thing. I get on the table. I didn't know this. Alyssa said that I had the most interesting session to watch.
Yeah,
so.
It was very interesting to watch on the Zoom, because a lot of times the horses, whatever the view of the camera was, sometimes the horses were covering the person. Sometimes the horses weren't doing that much. It was so different. Every session is so unique.
Yeah.
So sometimes the horses were moving and doing things that mattered and that were integral, and sometimes they were kind of just there, and their position is always important because of the magnetic field and the connection that's created. Everyone in the space is playing some role. So actually their physical positions around the person are always important, but sometimes it was more obvious and tangible, like what the horses were doing. And so Mikayla, I did think your session was the most interesting for me to watch from Zoom. And as soon as you got on the table, the horses all started shitting. No, there was one. It was Nova, maybe.
Oh, I thought you said they all were.
Two of them did. There was only one started, and it was just so funny. It's so funny to me, and I know that it's just a relief.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because you're like laying on the table, like I don't know what you're picking up on. I don't know what you can hear. I don't know what you're seeing. Also, the energy is so intense. I had a different experience being on Zoom. You're there, you're in person. The energy must be like a whole vortex of like, oh my God, and people are looking at you, and it's like you're putting on a show.
It is.
Yeah, you're putting on a show of your own healing in a way, but luckily it's in a safe space. But it's still you're putting on like a show. Like, welcome to the Mikayla's healing show. And so so the horses didn't do this for anyone else as far as I could see on Zoom. It's like 1 minute after you lay down on the table, one of them just started crapping, and so then
it's a release.
Yes, it's a release. But just to paint the picture of how they're releasing it, because they do release it in different ways. Sometimes they stomp, and sometimes they like
yawn. Or
there was another yawn, I think, that happened maybe for you or for someone else.
There was a few yawns that happened for me. Yeah.
So, and then like maybe 30 minutes in or like 15 minutes in, there was a different horse that started crapping, releasing again too. So like, hey, I love seeing the visual effects of that. Like that's like, oh, there's you can really see it being released. So it's like energy is really moving. It's cool to see. So that was one thing that happened when you started.
Yeah. And I mean, that stuff happened with other people too. Maybe for me, it was just kind of like all at once, and maybe you had like a better view of it.
Yeah.
Since
I might
like
have just had a better
on
view.
Zoom.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I didn't really know that was happening because I'm just like, well, focus on me for one, and my view is kind of like the barn like roof, like that's kind of just like what I'm looking up at. And even with like the energy vortex and stuff like that, like as soon as I got on the table, I could feel the energy. I was like, oh. And so I like immediately started breathing really deeply, like I had to, like I was just like
yeah,
and just
good.
like repeat. So like the horses are picking up on that and then like releasing him. Loesje made a comment on that too. Like as soon as I was on the table, before she even really asked me what my agenda was or anything, she's like, oh, see the horses, they're releasing for Mikayla. Like they're releasing already. So yeah, let's get into it. She asked me again what my agenda was. And because she kind of asks that in the beginning of the session, she says like emotional or physical or spiritual, which in my opinion, they all kind of end up kind of tying together, but she does ask. And I didn't really know, like I didn't go into that week or day, like knowing what my agenda was at all. Like I didn't really want to plan on that because I knew whatever was going to come through was going to come through. And I don't know, I just didn't have anything. Like I did have things that I wanted healing and some shifts around, but I just like kind of naturally knew that was going to come. Like I didn't really have like a specific question or agenda, I guess. But then I was trying to hone in on that a little bit more when I did the Sananga. And a lot about being afraid of my power came through. And that was, and I noticed that with the angel. Yeah, I've had, actually, they're telling me that's not a story to share right now. Oh, but, okay. And yeah, interesting. But there was some connection with the angel that I seen and having a past life of it as an angel and just being afraid of my power. So I don't think I had to go deep to admit that, because like it's like what we talked about before with the subconscious stuff, even with like the entity on your wing that's like, well, it's actually like you're being held back because you want to be held back, but outwardly you don't say that. You're like, no, I want to be at the top. I want to do everything. I want to be the best version of myself. I want this. I want this. I want this. But then it's like, do you?
Yep.
So it's kind of one of those moments where it's just like, I'm afraid of my own power. And I don't know what that means really, but I feel it in my body. I felt it for a while. There's something there, and it kind of goes with the theme of being held back again too. Yeah. So that's what I said. I said, well, she said, well, what's your agenda? And I said, well, I'm not really sure, but there is this like essence of being afraid of my power has been coming up a lot. And so she felt into that. And then it was funny because she asked me, well, remind me what you do again. Yeah. And I go, well, I am an empathic medium. I do Reiki certified. I do past life regressions on people. Like spiritual guide, I guess. And then she's just like, well, what's your certification? And I was like, well, I did do the Reiki certification. And she's like, well, what about past life regressions? How did you learn that? I'm like, well, I've been working with my mentor for a while, and he helps me. He guides me with a lot of things, and I've done them on myself. And she's just like, oh, okay. like everything I kind of said. Yeah. And like, it was interesting.
In a triggering way.
Yeah, it was triggering. Like it came up a few times. She's like, well, what's your certification? What's your education on that? And that was triggering for me. Oh, yeah. Although, I knew like at the time it was funny how I was able to let it go. I was actually laughing because like I knew it was going to come up.
Yeah. Oh, really? Well, but her tone was okay. Well, her tone got very cheeky at some point, but in this beginning point, it wasn't. Maybe she gets into this whole thing, which I'll talk about, but like, well, it wasn't like in the beginning when she was asking, it wasn't really in a cheeky way. It was like, what are your certifications? It was. Yeah. That's triggering.
It was triggering. it was definitely triggering, and like it wasn't the first time it came up. Like when I had the first phone call when I went to the observer session, it was the same thing too. Like like she asked me on text, it was a pattern. She asked me on text, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do I do? And then I get on the phone. Well, what do you do again? And then I'd say, well, I do this and this, and I have this mentor. Well, what's your mentor's training? I don't know. He's never told me. Yeah. And so that was interesting too, because that brought up obviously the triggers in me where it's just like, do I need more certification? Do I need like this actual this? Do I need this actual this? Do I need this actual this? Like, am I not good enough? Am I doing it wrong? Am I not, like, all of these coming up, which are my own inner wounds from, like, you talked about some of your PhD school stuff, and I don't have a PhD, but I also went through school, and had a lot of moments like that where I felt like I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't smart enough, or I wasn't doing enough, or right. So a lot of my own healing around that. And so for her to just kind of be like, well, what's your training? Especially too, when like I did have things like, well, I do have Reiki training with like energy healing and stuff. And like, I do have, my mediumship certificate. And she's like, how do you get certified in that? Like, just very like point blank. And it was interesting. And then she had this moment where she stopped, and she's like, all right, where I'm standing right now, she's like, I want to give you shit. She's like, so I'm going to go stand over here. And so she moved her point of reference to me. She was like
circling you the whole time. Like, so, you watched back what I had just recorded on my phone. But yes, a lot of this time beginning, she was like circling Mikayla, like, but stopping in different points. But it was so interesting, the visual of it all, like, because it was very significant. It was very relevant. She was circling you, stopping at different points.
Yeah, because each point was a different perspective.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was so funny. So she's like, okay. She's like, I want to give you shit. And I could hear myself on the video. I'm like, you can give me shit. It's fine.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then she moves to the next spot. And the next spot, she was just like, what did she specifically say? She was something like, she's like, that's old. She's like, getting a certificate and doing it by the book. She's like, that's old paradigm thinking. She's like, that's the old way, and we're moving into the new way, Loesje. So like, we have to let these old souls come in and have their remembrance and like do their thing. And I was like, oh wow. And she's like, look at her. Like, she's so amazing. She's on her podcast. She's speaking her truth. And it was just like, just that perspective shift and like where she was at. It was just like speaking into it was like really interesting. Yeah, and then she moved to another spot kind of behind me, and then she got into, well, how are you certified, Loesje? She was like, where'd your certificate come from? She's just like, oh, I was certified by the animal kingdom. She's like, and it was just like, she's like, who gives you the right to certify people for your animal linking awareness journey? And like the perspectives of that were so interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like giggling the whole time. I was just like, like it was just funny.
It was funny.
And so she kept going around into these other in a circle around me and these different perspective points, and then she'd come back to the point, and she literally said, she's like, okay, I have to leave this point of judgment. And it's funny because these points are actually playing out physically, like she's actually moving around to different points. So she's like, I have to leave this point of judgment where she's like, who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing? And like move into the next point where she's just like, oh, well, these old souls carry this remembrance, and they're like here to like, she's like, they don't need to be taught. They're like bored of the systems and the structures, and they don't need to be taught because they have this inner remembrance, and like, and then it was move around again.
Generational. It was, and then again in this time she brought back the whole thing about the indigos, and it's like, oh well, you're an indigo, and so the indigos are here with their own knowledge, and they come with their own knowledge, and maybe they don't need certifications, and kind of back to the generational thing, which, and know, she is a generation above us, or maybe 2 generations above us, so yeah. And that's interesting too. And she even said that as she was moving around, she's like, is this session for me or is it for you? So it was super interesting how there was something that also in that one spot triggered her and a response in her to like, bring up something for her, which was so interesting, I think, for like us to like kind of move through that at the same time. And then she'd move
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah, because when I brought up that aspect of your reading with Jackie the next day, like she was saying yes, like that, because that did kind of trigger something in Loesje too, but she's kind of just narrating it in her funny way that she does, that is also so filled with wisdom, and there's so many different ways to take away from it. But so what Jackie was saying too is that she was saying, so my sister is 10 years older than me, so she is also kind of sort of like in a similar but a little bit different generation, and she's been doing this for a while too. And she was saying that she herself also gets triggered too. There's some kind of generational thing with this whole certification and with the spirituality, and the people in our generation, especially the ones that rapidly woke up a lot in 2020, are kind of coming into this stuff like very rapidly, and it's like very quick. And I think for the generations above us, it was more of a slow burn, and there's this weird kind of trigger point around it
even, or like,
yeah. Right. Yeah, totally. And I can understand that, like a resentment, like,
totally.
I can totally understand that, being like, I spent so many years either doing these certifications that 10 years ago you had to do. It's totally different time right now in 2023, with everyone having their own business and on Instagram and everything. And it's so different. And these other generations, either like it was a much slower burn learning the spiritual wisdom that they have, and or doing these certifications and feeling like you need to get to this certain point, when it's happening a lot more rapidly for our generation, and even like the younger people, like people that are in their early 20s and teenagers now. Like one of my really good friends, Hiba, shout out, she listens to the podcast. She's in Jenny's membership with me and everything too. I think Hiba's like 18 or 19, and she's like full blown, in this world too, and it's awesome. But yeah, so it's so different.
And that's happening more and more. And she said that too. She was just like, well, I had all these indigo kids who are just like, they're bored, and they're like, yeah, okay, this is nice, but can you do anything faster? Like, we need faster learning. Yes. And she was like, oh, okay. And then she's like, and that's where she talked about, she made the 3 levels of her like linking awareness journey. But it's so interesting because she mentioned that too. She's like, well, how did you learn? She's like, how did you learn to teach nonverbal communication with the animals? Well, from the animal kingdom. She's like, well, you got your certificate from the animal kingdom, Loesje. Like, she's a funny character. She's a very like, she's just got such a personality, like the lady.
Yeah, it was very entertaining.
Yeah, very entertaining. Very much appreciate that about her. But there's something else that I want. Oh yeah. And like, there is a piece, because there is a lot of people, and like maybe this is some of the false light stuff too, because there is like false light stuff. This may be a little bit of a tangent, but false light stuff coming through, and like I do get it, where they're looking like, what do you think you're doing? Like, it's dangerous. Like, it's kind of back to like the channeling thing.
Yes.
Because there is people out there who actually don't know what they're doing, and that's kind of what I meant with like the false light. And then that's where it comes back to having your own inner wisdom and your own intuition to be in a high vibrational place where you can discern when you're going to work with somebody, if like their energy, and like if they're actually who they say they are, or if they're actually able to like guide you and support you.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
I just wanted to add that quickly in there.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely important, because it's like there are these people that there's plenty of people that also could have great power. With great power comes great responsibility.
Definitely.
There's plenty of people that don't know how to wield it, and we're also still learning too. So, just that whole thing with the certifications and stuff was so interesting. And it's like, cause the way I see it now, like I guess from my perspective, and we were just talking about this before we started recording, like from my perspective, because I don't really have a spiritual business or anything, I don't even think of, I guess, because what I've mostly witnessed of it is the things that have come up in this last few years with people having businesses and through Instagram and just offering readings and everything. Like, I guess besides maybe things like Reiki, or if you're going to call it a name, because people are just coming into their own powers, I don't even think about certifications that much. But it's obviously is because the way that but probably because I'm an indigo, and I'm just like, oh yeah, like, what do you mean? Like, people come here, and if you have powers, or you are able to develop your intuition and and connect with people, then you can just offer services, and you know, everyone has to use their own discernment, you know, but that's just how it works. It's just a game of discernment. I guess that's kind of the way that I see it. I'm like, it's just a game of discernment. It's like, you gotta, you know, you're gonna energy exchange. If you're gonna trust someone, then you get what you get, and that's kind of, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. But she was, and going on about how like the indigos and like the starseed generations that are coming through, like they don't need to be taught because their DNA holds the wisdom. So it was interesting how she was having this moment, I guess, with just like the old paradigm and the realizations of like breaking that down too. And that was really cool.
Mm-hmm. So was there any like conclusion of that thing? No, like just like anything in life, there was not really any conclusion to that whole thing with the certifications. It was all just about seeing these different perspectives of like what makes you certified, what doesn't. Does it really matter?
Well, I think the conclusion is that she mentioned like we are moving into a new paradigm, and they're like the old souls that are here now to do these things, they have the inner wisdom like within them. Yeah. And like you don't and it's old paradigm thinking to say that you need all of this stuff. Like, I mean, take that with a grain of salt, because I think there's layers to unpack there. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's kind of what came through. And we got into that a little bit more, because even for me, we got into later in my session when some like biological stuff came up, we got into that I'm an O negative blood type. And she's like, you're O negative? And she's like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then she tells everyone, she's like, O negative blood types are not from this planet. She's like, they are completely encoded with their own like inner wisdom, knowledge, everything. She said they're coming from star systems with wisdom in their genetics. Ooh, and she said, what is there to teach them? She literally said that. She's like, what is there to teach them?
Oh, shit. That's powerful.
And I was like, ooh. Yeah.
So much about like the DNA and like kind of came through in this day. Like a lot. Yeah. Like a lot about.
Yeah. The DNA.
Internal wisdom, internal knowing, and what's in your DNA and stuff like that.
The DNA stuff was super interesting. But yeah, and then so when she started talking more about like biologically what was really going on in my body, she said, why are you afraid of decalcifying your pineal gland? And I was like, I don't know. But then the other piece of me was like, my agenda, Loesje. I said I'm afraid of my power.
Yeah. And just to clarify, for the pineal gland is this, it's like the size of a walnut. It's basically the physicality of your third eye. It's in your brain. It's like in the center of it's like on the base of the center of your brain. It's the pineal gland. I believe there's actually like crystals. There's like biologically, there's like crystal pieces in it. Yep. The pineal gland is like, because crystals are holders of consciousness and their circuits and stuff like that. That's how it's our third eye. It's our psychic connection. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, mine's like tingly right now.
Ooh.
It happens a lot. But and off of your crystal thing, she was working on me doing the energy healing or whatever. She's talking to everyone else, and she was explaining there's like the crystals were like fractured in my pineal gland. She said there's like a fracture of the crystals. Yeah. And then Newt, can it? Okay. I'm recording.
What's he doing? Meowing?
Just a second. Yeah, I think he's hungry.
Oh.
But yeah, okay. So
the crystals in the pineal gland.
Yeah, so there was like fractured crystals in the pineal gland, and then she said there was different like compounds or crystals that were like grouping together in this area. This is what she was seeing, that weren't supposed to be grouping together. Because in her very funny personality, she's like, don't be a groupie.
Yeah, right. She says the most random things. It's like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she said that was what was going on in the pineal gland. And then she said there was a mind crystal in my heart between the left and the right atrium.
Oh.
So
wait, a
and
what
she
crystal?
said it was
A what? A
mind crystal is what she called it.
Hmm.
And so, and she said
is.
that was interfering with something, and then she cleared that, and then she was kind of asking me about my family's heart history, which I didn't know much about.
Uh-huh.
So, but that led us to some other things.
Yeah. Oh, that's what, okay, she asked about the heart history. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what kind of led into some other like family stuff that I'll get into on another episode. Sorry, guys. But it was funny. Nova. So Nova's the white horse with the blue eyes from Sirius. She's like really powerful. I mean, they're all powerful. They're fucking healing horses, like, or land dolphins as she called them.
Oh yeah.
Hey, just chill. Oh yeah. So Nova, while I'm on the table, she's putting her butt like right against my head, like right against it, like keeps moving it. Like I look up and I seen her vagina. Like it was like right, like horse vagina is like right above me, and and she's like this for like most of my session. Like she just keeps moving against me, and I had this thought. I'm like, please don't poop on me. Like
that was my thought too. Of course, yeah. So like when I'm witnessing this, and so the table that you're on is about like, I would say, so like if Lucia's standing next to you, your table of where you're laying at goes around to the average person's hip, something like that, right? So you're a little like you're not very high up. You're kind of like a little bit low down, and the horses are obviously very tall.
It's like a massage table or something. It's probably is a massage table.
Yeah, so a massage table, and this giant horse's ass is just like right in your face. And yeah, obviously from my perspective, I was like, oh my god. I was like, is the horse gonna poop on her? But then I was also like, these horses they know exactly what they're doing. So I was like, it knows what it's doing, and it's not gonna do that.
They do, because I did kind of like say that. I'm like, and Lucia's like, no, you're fine. And I was like, okay. But she did keep like just moving her butt against me, and so much too that her like tail was just like dangling in my face, and I'm like, and like Lucia's like trying to grab her tail. So
Lucia had to move the horsehair out, like because he wasn't even just standing there. He was kind of like moving a little bit, like he kept on moving, like almost like he wanted to like shit on you, but like he wasn't gonna. But he was just like kind of oscillating. One of his legs was moving up a little bit. I forgot.
Well, that part's important because I guess she was asking Lucia. She's just like, do I have to born her again? Do I have to born her again? So she was like using this energy of trying to like birth me.
Yes, right. And then like I thought that I couldn't tell if like Lucia was saying it as a joke or not. She was like, oh, does Mikayla need to be like reborn right now? And it was kind of something about that. But maybe it was maybe it was real, because didn't you say that Nova was the one that wants to have a baby? Like last episode you said Nova the horse wants to have a baby. Yeah,
and Lucia's like, we talked about this, but I think it was just their exchange like back and forth, and then like Lucia's also like trying to, I guess, narrate what they're saying out loud to us. But I think she was like, because she was using her rear end for some type of energetic thing. So even if, like, I mean, obviously it's symbolic, because I obviously didn't get rebirthed out of a horse's ass, but they get certified out of a horse's ass.
So funny.
But it's just the interaction with the horses and her, because even in my session, as the horses were all kind of around me doing stuff, they kept like kicking Lucia out, and that's why Lucia was like so far around me walking in a circle, because Nova kept like taking her head and like moving her out, and even Lucia specifically was like, oh, Nova's kicking me out again. And then she's like, oh, sorry, she's guiding me out, because she must have corrected her. Like the horse.
Okay, right. Yeah, that happened in the very beginning. It was kind of just like the Nova kind of just started like, it was like she was gently pushing Lucia out, like far from you.
Yeah,
and initially Lucia thought
field or whatever.
It was an entity. Yeah, like she interpreted it as like that the horses were trying to protect Lucia from something in your energy, was how she had initially.
She did bring up an entity, and that is important to remember. But yeah, and then I guess later she was like trying to like reboard me again, or she was asking if I needed to be reboard again, and that was kind of funny. And then and like at this time too, like I'm really feeling into the energy. Like I had my hands actually out because I needed to move the energy. Like I was just what was happening in my body.
Yeah.
And I had my hands like this, and the one horse that are like nibbly and just, and then, and then took a little nibble on my like ring finger, and I was like, ow! Like it wasn't that hard, but it was like a bite, and Lucia's like, hey, and then she was just like, oh, your ring finger, and then she's like, oh, your finger that connects you to the heart or something like that, because she knows all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh wow, interesting, because it was my actual like finger, my like left hand with my like wedding ring on it, or my engagement ring, and she pointed that out too.
Right.
But and then it was funny then too, because it was funny then because the horse was kept like moving up against me with its butt, and she's like, I don't even know what to say. She's like, is she getting certified of a horse's ass, or like, we'll have to play the clip. It was really funny.
Yeah, I'm gonna put that little clip either in here, or also maybe in here and also on the somewhere on Instagram of the video. Well, and and
what was leading up to that point actually of her saying that, okay, sorry, I gotta let Newt out. Leading up to before that, Lucia's working on me and just getting myself resituated. Lucia's working on me, and along with my certification talk and what did you do, I did tell her that I used to be a respiratory therapist. I don't actually know if I've even talked about this on the podcast, but
tiny bit.
I used to be a respiratory therapist. I graduated in 2020. And then I was no longer able to be a respiratory therapist. I did leave for a little bit just for like health reasons, honestly, like well-being reasons. And then shortly after that, the vaccines came into place. And so I'm actually not able to work anymore. But the respiratory therapy thing did come up with her, and just like working in the hospitals. And she goes, oh yeah, the surgery room is a really good place to pick up entities and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like I had to really shield myself when I was working in the hospital. Like I felt it. I could feel that energy. And then she was like, she's like, do you remember like a young person that died? And I'm like, maybe. I'm like,
yeah, probably a lot.
Yeah, like they're like, I don't like probably. And she's like, okay. She's like, well, I'm getting this vision of a young person on a table coding, and she's like, this person is, and she's like, and they left their body, and this person is coming in to thank you for helping them get to the other side, for letting them get to the other side. She's like, you gave them the breath of light, or no, the breath of light is what she said.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, when I was on the table, big release. Like I burst into tears when that happened. Because I was
crying from Zoom.
Yeah.
It was very powerful.
Yeah, because very powerful. Knew, and I felt it. And for her to bring that up and validate it, it was just like, yeah, like she said.
So at that point, did you have a specific person or like a few people in your mind that you know that you did, or like was it just that you've done that a few times, done that as in like helped someone cross over?
Yeah.
Was it just like a general thing, like that you've done that a few times?
Yeah, I just remembered back from being in the hospital, because she said specifically when she said specifically my presence helped the spirit get to the light, and like that young soul wanted to thank me.
Yeah.
And then I burst into tears, and she's like, yep, let it out, release. And I remembered back, I can't remember the specific person because, and this was so interesting that this has come up, because I've been told this multiple times in readings, as well as I feel this in my gut of like who I am. And this is why I was drawn to work in the hospital, because I actually miss working in the hospital a lot. Like I've been grieving it a lot, and there's not like, there's so many pieces that I don't miss. Like, I don't miss working shift work. Like, I don't miss working night shifts, and I don't miss like the 9 to 5, very systemic. I don't necessarily miss the environment. Like it's a very interesting environment because everyone's coping with the trauma that they see on a day-to-day basis. Although I've met a lot of really cool people there, but everyone,
You have to be very strong to be in that line of work, you know?
well, yeah. And there's everyone copes in their own ways, probably a lot of deflection of that trauma. And it's quite the environment for many reasons. And Loesje said that. She's like, yeah, a lot of entities in the surgery room, a lot of low vibrational stuff in the hospitals. And it's like, I know that, I feel that. Why do you think most people say,
Right.
Why do most people say I hate hospitals? Everyone hates hospitals.
Exactly. It's like, it's insane. There's just,
But that was
the energy is
interesting.
but it's like, yeah, well, it's like, you know, you've talked about this, that you feel you are very drawn to that boundary of life and death for a reason. That's why this came up.
Yeah, exactly. And so that validation was really cool because that's not something I really make conversation with people, or people would know about me, or I'd ever really say.
Especially now that you're not in that field anymore too.
No, yeah, that too. And like, yeah, so, and that was the thing that drew me to it, is I actually don't hate hospitals, and which is why I was like, I can do this work and I can do this. And I was drawn to it. And part of my spiritual awakening happened when I was in school, and I had to really learn how to shield myself and understand my energy to like get through the day. And then as I became more aware of like spirits and stuff around me, when I was working in the hospitals, I would open up portals for the spirits if they would leave their body, or if I felt one was nearby and it left and it needed to go. And I mean, I was around death all the time as a respiratory therapist. We went to the codes. We were the death team. Some people called us that. Like,
really?
Yeah.
Wait, are you the your profession is that's the one that like kind of calls time of death and like,
well, I mean, anyone
coding
can
stuff,
call
or like the
time of
right.
death.
I don't know how any of that stuff
That's
works.
okay. So usually respiratory therapists, like we get like, I mean, the word maybe, because when you think about it, it sounds a little bit more like in a clinic. Like, it doesn't sound maybe as intense as it can be, but we're in the ICU. Sorry. I mean, and there's a plethora. You can work in small clinics, but my experience in the ICUs, we're with people that are on life support. We run and manage and program the life support machines, so the actual breath, as well as like intubate patients and put like the breathing tube like down their throats. So really everything with the breath of life, which is so interesting because she said I gave this person the breath of light.
Oh yeah. Whoa.
And so we're constantly around codes. When in the hospital, when bing, bing, bing code, we get a page, and whoever wants to go to the code, or it's turn to go to the code, you go to the code, and we like run the codes with the other like nurses. There's usually a nurse or a couple nurses and a doctor there. And then usually we're on compressions, or we're intubating them and have them on a bagger. So we're like giving them artificial breaths, like, and that's what happens when you run a code on somebody. And then either you resuscitate them or you don't. And like, people are constantly dying in hospitals. So I felt that energy. I felt the spirits. I'd either be at a code, near a code, or I'd feel a spirit around me, and I'd say, okay. And I'd open up the portal. I'd open up a light portal, and I'd let them cross over. But it's not something I've ever really talked about or told anyone. So the fact that she brought it up and said that like a soul thanked me was like, wow, like just so profound.
Getting that acknowledgement, you know, be like, and also it's like, you know, there's this stuff around, I'm just getting just more stuff around that whole thing with that profession for you, and feeling like you never got to fully see it out and live it out as much as you wanted to and get the acknowledgement for it too, and just the fact that you graduated in 2020 and
all of that was so interesting too, because she's like, and she said that she kind of brought up, she said she didn't like the word, but like death doula. She's like, when they stop breathing, you know how to get them to the other side. And like this validation of my soul was just like, wow. And she's like, that's why you're here. And then it came up again. She said, you don't need a certificate for that. She's like, you know how to do that. And the certificate thing came like around again, like full circle. And it was just like, whoa. And I think that's again where she brought up, she's like, anyways, the horse's ass.
And, you know, it's like people don't really think about that. People don't, because a lot of people maybe aren't familiar with this aspect of crossing over into the light, or that sometimes souls have a hard time being trapped in between worlds. It's actually a really common, not necessarily a trap, but kind of just, it takes souls sometimes a long time to cross over. And it's like people don't really think about that as much, needing the assistance with transitioning in that way, just like we need assistance with bringing in a new soul. It's like, and that's definitely something that is so specific to you and your abilities and your gifts in this lifetime, you know?
Yeah, it was so cool. And that's what she brought up too. She's like, this is like your soul purpose, mission stuff. She's like, some people will call it a gift.
Yes.
And then she was saying, she was like, she also said there's a lot of lost souls that leave like this reality, and then they get stuck somewhere in between on the other side, and they need that presence of that light to cross them over. And even she said, she was like, when my father left, she's like, I sat with him and I watched his spirit leave his body, and I helped him to the other side. And my mom was like, or her mom was just like, oh my God, how'd you do that? And she's like, I don't know, I just did it. And she's like, no one certified for me for that. She's like, God certified me for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was crazy. God certified me for that. I love it.
That was, it's really
so true.
Cool.
It's just like, that was really powerful.
And she brought back, and she kind of said like the death doula, which made so much sense to me, because I've been told that before. Like I kind of mentioned that before, like that I walk this line of like life and death. And I really resonate with that. So I'm going to have to like feel into that a little bit more. And that's why I was called to work in the hospital. But she's just like, she's like, what it is, she's like, it's a midwife on the other side. She's like birthing the spirit. She's like birthing into the other side for the spirit, into the quantum world, which I had a crazy visualization of that. Like that's so crazy. Cause you think when we're like birthed into this world, into earth, into like humanness, like you have the midwife and you have the doula there, but then it's just like, that's why it's these constant death and rebirth cycles, because then when the spirit stops breathing and leaves its body, and she was saying like death doula, it's like the present, she's like, you're a midwife for on the other side, so you're birthing spirit back into the quantum field as the midwife. Whoa. Or the death doula, or whatever.
And it really is a perfect two-way street. Like there's not, it's different, it's one side is just different than the other, but it still goes both ways.
They're just,
and they both need assistance to pass through that portal.
Yeah, you're being birthed into the quantum reality, into the quantum field, into just something different. And that's,
and there is an in-between phase like that spirits need to go through, that I've heard and resonate with that information, that like, to kind of process, there's like a waiting period, you know, an in-between.
I think it depends.
Process that lifetime.
It depends on like the spirit. There was just this meme that see if I can find it, that I really, not a meme, but it was like a visual. So it's this like circle, and there's this lady who's like laying on her back, and she's giving birth, but her head is outside of the circle, and her head is a skull, and it's like in this like dark vastness, but then inside the circle is her human body giving birth, and the baby's a baby, and then you watch as the baby ages, and the baby gets a little bit older and older, and You see it in the different phases of life, and now the baby has a lover, and the baby is an old man and is on a cane, old man, and then at the very top of it is a lady almost again in the birthing position, but she's like all like black and kind of like misty, and it's like this old man goes back into her, and then her head is outside of the circle. Sorry, this might be kind of hard to follow, but we'll post it. Her head is outside of the circle, and then her head is like a fetus being birthed.
Whoa.
You'll have to look at it. It's pretty wild.
Hold it up to the Zoom for a sec for me.
Put it on the Zoom.
Hold it up to the camera. Yeah. Oh wow, that is very intricate. Oh. Wow, that's very intricate. Okay, yeah. Wow, and that also was very, very descriptive of literally exactly what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, well, that's very much the visual or something similar to that's what I was getting with, like, and then so like being the death doula, it's like up here birthing back into the quantum field of wherever your spirit goes after.
Yeah. Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, so like was there anything else that like kind of that brought up for you that you want to talk about, like that whole like crossing other spirits over?
Well,
part of the session.
The other interesting thing about that is like when I've been working with my mentor, he's brought it up a couple times. He's just like, you know, practice your mediumship, as well as not too long ago, probably still like a couple months ago, but what is time? He was like, you're going to have training for crossing souls over. Like one of your overnighting mentors is going to come in, might wake you up in the middle of the night, like might be in a dream. They're going to train you or do more training to cross the souls over. And that was really interesting that he brought that up. And then that came up in this session with Loesje too. Because he's been talking about that. He's like, this is what you're like, he said it kind of briefly, but the thing is with him is he's here to support me and guide me. But a lot of these revelations and things I'm supposed to learn on my own, because as an energetic healer, I have to learn how to heal myself to support others in that space. Like it's not going to work for me for someone to just do the energetic clearing and energy work. I have to do it myself.
Right. And it's interesting too that you say the training is coming from within, from like, again, back to this whole training certification. He didn't say, oh, you have to go see this person to help certify you. He's saying you're getting trained in your sleep in the astral realms by your own fragments of your other aspects of you.
Well, and that's interesting too, because he said by one of your overnighting mentors, probably from the Sophia Code, which would be a spirit guide or one of the mentors from the Sophia Code. And then again, that kind of goes back to what we were talking in the beginning with your session is, oh, am I channeling that? Or inner wisdom? Inner, like...
Right, exactly. Right. Where is that wisdom coming from you? It's more so of remembrance than you channeling how to learning how to cross people over. Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. It's so funny. Like I did not even realize how magical and synchronistic or important everything from that day and each of our sessions was until we're like unpacking it. I mean, I did realize, but you know, there's another level of understanding that's happening right now that I'm like, wait, it's all coming around.
Yeah. It's cool for us to like unpack it in kind of real time like this. And also, I hope we can get Loesje on the podcast. I believe you had a conversation with her where she said she offered to or wanted to. So I'm really hoping we can do that, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, she definitely said that she will. So, you know, that's just a matter of divine timing, logistics. If we want to see if you could be there in person at the ranch or something, could be cool. We'll leave it open, but definitely at some point. So
yeah, look.
This magical person that's now appeared on since this is going to be 3 episodes of the podcast so far, but it's like so cool. Everything that's coming up with this is interesting.
Oh yeah, it's beyond cool. Just the synchronicities, and even when you're there, like just some of the people you'd meet and talk to, you're like, oh wow, your story is exactly like mine, and we're both here today. That's so Like, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So was there anything else that came up? I'm trying to remember of anything that
No, that's basically my experience. And thank you, Loesje,
that was kind
and Akash and Lyra and Nova.
The whole
and
team,
everyone that was there
the whole
to
gang.
hold space and support. And yeah,
The sessions end by like divine timing, right? There was no like, because I noticed that it was kind of just like whenever the time was done for it to, it wasn't like we're running out of time, let's see. I mean, maybe like a little bit, but it was kind of just, I don't know, it was cool to witness it. It was kind of just very much like, whatever, however much time this needs, or like whenever it's like, there's nothing else for us to do today.
And it was very flowy in that way too, because even when I'd been there before, I talked about in the podcast where she had to take some time to hold space for the horse, for Akash, because he was going through something that had come up, and she's like, I need to hold space for him now. Like, the focus is on him now. Mm-hmm. And so we did that. So I think, I mean, however many people show up or however many people she takes, she kind of like probably intuitively knows that, or there's some type of like ping of, yeah. And then like, it also says on, like when you sign up for it, it's like 9 a.m. to 4 to 5:30. So there is like an hour and a half kind of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like I feel like I learned a lot too, just from, there were so a few of the other things that I had kind of learned or was thinking about a lot after, was one of them being this whole concept of like constellation. She kept on referring to it as like constellations, and Jackie, my sister, was saying there's some kind of modality called like family constellations, but the concept is about and that's why she said that she likes doing group work. It's about how the cluster of people that were there, well, a few things on this. For one, it was divinely timed. It was divinely orchestrated, that every single soul that was there as an observer, as a surrogate, as receiving a session, was all divinely orchestrated for this grouping on the Zoom, in person, everywhere, to be there in that moment and receiving whatever needed to be brought up. And then, kind of just talking about, this is where the horses and the animals come in too, how just like you create this group force field, this group magnetic field, and you're all interacting, your fields are all interacting with each other, so that if one person moves, the energy is shifted. Tell everyone what you didn't, like when someone got up to go to the bathroom, didn't they put something in place?
When we came back and sat down, the one lady who's actually your surrogate, she picked up, because she kept the fire running throughout the day, putting logs on the fire, and she'd pick up a piece of cedar, and she'd like look right at you, and then she'd like put the cedar on the fire every time someone got up, came back down to sit down.
That's what it was.
Cedar on the fire. Yeah.
I thought you said they put this. Maybe because it's seat. I thought you meant that they put like well, it's still cool, but I thought you meant that they put like something else on your chair in place of you while you're gone. That would be cool. Okay, but so she like when someone gets up to go to the bathroom or leaves a circle, she replaces the energy. That would be my interpretation of it, replacing the energy or something like that in the fire.
I think maybe just like cleansing or something, because she put it on the cedar when we got back. So once we got back from where we were and sat down, and I think it was just maybe like a recalibration of the energy is kind of how I read it.
Oh yeah. Okay, maybe that. Yeah, I might have misinterpreted like whatever you had said that I thought, but it still kind of applies to the same idea, which is that any grouping of people or sentient beings or anything, your magnetic fields are always all interacting with each other, and it's always a group thing. And she had kind of compared it to constellations, and how what a constellation in the sky, and how just stars, like, and it's just the projection line of sight, and it's just like the relative positions and the orientations of things. And I don't know, that just got me thinking about some other things. It kind of got some wheels turning in my head that I was like,
that is interesting.
And in that sense,
sorry, it was interesting that you said that, because while I was there, I was like very aware of also the points of everyone too. Like I remember thinking they all made a star, and like thinking of the way the energy was bouncing back and forth between the star, and you think star constellations, because like they're like with Loesje and the 3 horses, there was 4 points, and then the person on the table was 5 points. So I kept seeing like the star connection, like of energy between them.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so cool. And like, yeah, just about how our physical geographical location is affected by others. And she said something off the cuff like, well, one day if I'm driving into the city, I don't know why I'm driving into the city, but maybe it's because someone else on the other side of the world started moving in some other direction and I'm connected to them for some reason.
Cool.
So because of that, I gotta go into the city. And it's like, it's just so true. It's like there's these connections, or it's like maybe you have a cord with someone or something, and they're moving. They travel across the country or to a different city, and as a byproduct of that, you get this random impulse to go drive somewhere else that day, and it just like these things are happening.
We're all connected.
No,
nothing's an accident.
So I wanted to mention
Nothing is a coincidence, and the more and more you do this work, the more you realize that.
Yeah, it's good. It's awesome.
Well, I'm hungry.
I'm hungry too. All right, yeah. So this has been awesome episode that it's actually going to be 2 episodes. So I'm like, I don't even know. You said everything to say. Yeah, so we're going to wrap it up there.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to the podcast, please. It really helps us out. Please give us a rate and review. That also really helps us out. If you find any type of value in listening to us, as well as subscribe to our YouTube, like